Hey everybody, hope that you're doing well. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the decisions that went into building this beautiful bike. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who watched my first few videos and who commented. I really appreciate your comments, and I also really appreciate those who subscribe to the channel. So if you like the content that I'm sharing here in regards to bikes and all things related to cycling, please consider subscribing and joining me for further videos. Anyways, back to this bike here. I've been thinking about buying a bike probably for, I would say, at least the last 5 to 6 years. And it wasn't until this summer when I really started to get back into cycling and really starting to put on the miles that I started thinking about maybe it's the right time for me to look at buying a new bike. Because as I had said in some of my previous videos, the current bike that I have, I've been riding on almost 20 years. And so I figured it was time for an upgrade. And so I went to my local bike shop and I said, I'm interested in a road bike and I'm looking for something with rim brakes. And the salesperson kind of looked at me with just a puzzled look in his face because he literally said that they only had one bike on the showroom floor that had rim brakes, and it was more of an entry level road bike. And given that I've been riding for almost 2 decades, it was not the right bike for me. And so I said, I'm looking for something to replace my old bike, which has got Ultegra components, mechanical, and I don't think that I need electronic components because I find the mechanical components to work just fine for my own needs. I don't think I need disc brakes either. And there was just nothing available from some of the big bike manufacturers. So I took his advice and I test rode a couple of the current models that they had available, which were all electronic components with disc brakes. And there was a couple of bikes during that first test ride that I really liked. One of them was the Specialized Tarmac. I also test rode an Enve Melee, and I liked the way those bikes responded, but given their price, it was just a little bit beyond what I was willing to spend at the time. Now, you have to keep in mind that the last time I had purchased a bike was in 2006. And as everybody knows, the bicycle industry has really shot up its product prices since then. And so I was in a little bit of a sticker shock to see the cost of a bike that was equivalent in level of performance as my bike was when I bought it almost 20 years ago. And so after that initial visit to the bike shop, I felt a little discouraged and I thought, well, maybe buying a new bike isn't for me, given that there aren't really any rim brake options out there, and the price point for an equivalent bike to the one that I currently ride was well beyond what I was willing to pay. So I started to fantasize about this idea of taking my old Le Mans and just restoring it, and doing a little bit of a resto mod, getting the frame repainted, getting a more current group set on it, changing out the wheels, this and that, and trying to keep that bike on the road and get everything that I wanted out of a bike, which was essentially my old bike, but with a little bit better components, a little bit better gearing, and wider tires and wider rims. Well, I started to price that out and I realized that it would have costed me quite a bit of money to restore that bike. And so back to the drawing board I went and I started to do my hunt for frames that were still being manufactured that would accept rim brakes. Now, during that first visit to the local bike shop, another bike that I had saw on their showroom floor and had test ridden was a Moots. And when I immediately saw that bike, I remembered how I had had this dream of owning a Moots probably about 10 plus years ago after having first seen them in person. And so the idea was set in my head of wanting to build a titanium frame bike. Now, the reason why I was interested in a titanium frame bike, other than the lure of titanium frames and those built by companies like Moots, is because the current bike that I have, I've been riding for almost 2 decades, and I love the fact that that bike has lasted as long as it has. In fact, it's still a great bike, and I still have every intention on continuing to ride it even after I have brought this bike into my garage. So I have this concept in mind of having a bike that would last me the next 20 years of my cycling life, which at my age might take me almost to, the point where I'm not able to cycle anymore. So I wanted something that could last the test of time. And so, of course, titanium came into the picture in regards to that. I had also considered steel, but coming from a steel carbon frame, I wanted something that was a little bit different. Now, I'd also thought about carbon bikes as well, but there's something about the the beauty of the round metal tubing, the sort of luster of the natural titanium finish, and of course the exclusivity of riding a titanium frame, given that so many bikes these days are carbon, was really appealing to me and really sort of tickling my fancy, so to speak. So I went down the hunt to see what other titanium frames were being built and whether there was frames that were out there that were still being built for rim brakes. On Moots' website, I realized that they were no longer building rim brake bikes. And as the case would be, most of the other titanium manufacturers in the US were also not building rim brake bikes anymore, or if they were being phased out of their catalog. And the only manufacturer that I found in my research that was still committed to building rim brake bikes and that could accommodate 28 millimeter wide tires was Mosaic. And so I did a little bit of a research, and I found a dealer nearby who sold Mosaic frames, and I went down to that dealer and test rode a bike. And I really loved the way that it felt. I loved the smoothness of the frame. I loved how responsive it was to power. When I'd push down on the pedals, the bike would go. I loved the nimbleness of the bike, and I loved the way it looked. And given that it was titanium, it was lighter than the existing bike that I had, which for me was a step in the right direction. Of course, it's not as light as a carbon frame, but again, there are so many other criteria to me that are important other than weight, longevity, durability, and maintenance as being some of the three main criteria, that sacrificing a little bit of weight gain wasn't really a problem for me. And so I found this frame and I decided to build it up. I bought it from the bike shop, and over time, it took me a couple of months to actually figure out what I wanted to put on the bike. And then it took me even more time to source all of those parts. But eventually, what I came up with in all of that research and decision making was to go with the Dura-Ace 9100 11-speed mechanical rim brake group set. Now, the local bike shop had recommended to me to go with Campagnolo, given that Campagnolo is really the only company that's currently making high quality level gruppos for rim brake. But I tried Campagnolo, I tried some bikes that had chorus on there, and I tried some bikes that had record. And as great as they shifted, I just did not feel entirely sold with the method of shifting, which, if you don't know about Campagnolo, you have to use your thumbs in order to downshift. And given that I was coming from a bike that I've owned for 20 years that had Ultegra on it, I was very, very comfortable with Shimano. I felt like I didn't want to change. I knew Shimano, I knew exactly how it worked, I knew how easy it was to maintain, how reliable it could be, and how easy it was to source the parts. And so ultimately my decision led me to stick with Shimano. Now I also could have gone with Ultegra, the equivalent 11-speed group set to this Dura-Ace one, which is R8000. But given that this is going to be a quote forever bike and last me for the next 20 years, I wanted to put something on there that was really special. And given that Dura-Ace 9100 is no longer in production and Shimano is no longer making mechanical rim brakes for the Dura-Ace line, I thought that I wanted to go ahead and go all in and get the last generation of Dura-Ace for this bike. And so that's what I had. I've got the Mosaic frame matched with the Dura-Ace 9100 11-speed mechanical rim brake group set. So with those two components out of the way, the next step, which was probably one of the hardest decisions to make, was deciding upon the wheels. And as you probably know, if you are an aficionado or rider of rim brakes, there just aren't very many options out there for rim brake. And specifically for me, I was looking for a lightweight alloy wheel. And the reason for that is because I wanted a wheel that would be durable. I wanted a wheel that would be, quote, bomb-proof, and one that wouldn't break the bank. And so I did a ton of research on this, and every time I went into forums or did research online, the answers always pointed towards HED as being one of the top manufacturers for rim brake wheel sets. But HED actually makes a lot of different types of wheel products. They make their own wheel set with their own hubs, which is what I have here, the HED Ardennes. And this wheel set actually comes in two versions. It comes with the regular alloy brake tracks, and it also comes with the black textured brake tracks. In addition to that, HED also makes the Belgium, which is just the rim. And so I had this idea of building up some custom wheels with those HED Belgium rims, putting them on some really nice hubs, but ultimately I decided to stick with the stock offerings from HED, which is the Ardennes, which I have here. And the main reason why I did that was ultimately down to cost. Well, my microphone just died on me, so I'm gonna have to edit this and insert this into the video. So back to the wheels. Ultimately, I ended up going with the stock option from HED because I was able to get these wheels for significantly less than if I were to have built custom wheels using HED rims. And so far they've been great. I really like the way the wheels feel. They feel like they are pretty responsive to input, so when I pedal hard, the wheels go. There's not a lot of flex to them. They seem to be pretty smooth across the bumps, and I also really like the way that they look. One thing that's hard to tell from pictures and that I didn't know about until the wheels arrived at my house was that the logos on the rims are actually etched with laser. So they're laser etched logos, they're not a sticker, and they're not paint, which to me really makes the wheels look extra nice. And then the last thing I'll mention is in regards to the cockpit area. So currently I have on the bike a stem and handlebar combination from Ritchey, and it comes from their comp level of equipment, which is an alloy stem and handlebar. And the size of the stem is 100 mil and the size of the handlebar is a 42. Now, I purchased those and put them on the bike because I liked the feeling of the handlebar, and I felt that a 100 mil stem would be a good place for me to start. That being said, I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to keep those on the bike. They're just a way for me to ride the bike and to start. And so my plan is to ride the bike, get a feel for the handlebar and stem length, and so far I actually really like the shape of the handlebar. It feels really good in my hand. I like riding in the hoods on them, and I also like the feeling of the drops. If you can see here, the length of the drop actually kind of goes a little bit longer than some handlebars, and I like that. It gives me some stability when I'm riding in the drops. But I'm also interested in exploring other handlebar and stem combos, and so there are other manufacturers whose products I'm interested in taking a look at, Enve being one of them. Bjorn Cycles is another one that's caught my eye, and those tend to be more lighter, obviously, since they're carbon. But again, I'm not super focused on weight because I like the bike as it is right now. And the last thing I'll say is in regards to the seat post and the saddle. As I've mentioned in my other videos, the current setup that I have here is just the seat post and saddle taken off of my Le Mans. And I put them on there because I'm not actually sure what is going to go on this bike, but ultimately I'm going to be taking that back off of this bike and putting it back on my Le Mans so I can continue to ride that bike. And so time will tell what saddle and seat post combination I eventually put on this bike permanently. So that's it for now. That is a quick look at the bike and the build. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions in regards to any of the products that are on this bike, shoot me a question in the comments and I'll try to respond to it. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.